Tyson Fury says that he's open to a fight with Stipe Miocic in a boxing match. Stipe called him out. He was on Ariel Helwani's MMA show. Ariel breaking all the news this week. And Stipe says that he's open to boxing Tyson Fury. Now, he did say this before when it was Anthony Joshua. Anthony Joshua, I don't know who that is. Stipe has that background in boxing. He's a very good striker. And we've seen this a little bit with Jorge, too. Jorge has said that he wants to fight Canelo Alvarez. Look, the Canelo thing with Jorge Masvidal, that's not going to happen. It's not going to happen. I just don't think that Masvidal is as established enough of a pay-per-view star to make Canelo want to make that fight happen. I really don't. I don't think that fight can be close to Floyd Mayweather versus Conor McGregor. It just can't be. Conor McGregor and Floyd Mayweather are two of the biggest combat pay-per-view stars of all time. That's why you make that fight. Masvidal, he's just not there yet. And maybe he will be. Maybe give him a couple of years. Maybe show that, if he fights Nick Diaz, fights for the title, and fights Conor McGregor, then maybe do the Canelo fight. I could definitely see that. But right now, his next, I don't think he's there yet. It doesn't mean it's completely out of the question that Masvidal gets the Canelo fight, but I feel like he would need to do this. Fight for the title, fight Nick Diaz, fight Conor McGregor, or two out of those three, get a couple more million-plus pay-per-view buys, and then Canelo's like, all right, this guy clearly has got that behind him. But just one, I feel like if I'm Canelo Alvarez, I'm like, what is it worth it? Is it worth doing that fight? Is it worth this crazy dude from Miami who comes from the backyards and all that stuff? Is it worth me fighting that fight for it just being another number? I think you got to realize with these boxers who want to do these crossover fights, it needs to be astronomical. But the Tyson Fury Stipe Miocic fight is a little bit different. It's a little bit different. Here's why. Okay. With Canelo and Jorge Masvidal, there's a very clear rift because Canelo is under the contract of DAZN. He has the biggest contract in combat sports. He's a DAZN fighter. Therefore, you would need Jorge Masvidal to get the approval of UFC to do the fight. But if you were to do a Tyson Fury fight against Stipe Miocic, both of those gentlemen, though they're under different promoters, they're on the same network. It's ESPN. So the Tyson Fury Stipe Miocic fight is not very hard to make. I mean, quite frankly, all it takes is Disney or ESPN calling up Dana White, calling up Bob Arum and says, I want this fight, baby. I want a lot of people buying ESPN Plus. And you get the power behind that. The heavyweight champ from UFC, the heavyweight champ from boxing, the lineal heavyweight champion, and you do all the promotion you can on ESPN for it, I think that would do very, very big numbers. It doesn't have a lot of hurdles because they're already under the same umbrella. It could be Dana White doesn't want to expose Stipe to that, but he really doesn't have anything to lose. He really doesn't have anything to lose. And quite frankly, I only feel like can benefit a guy like Stipe. Stipe is a guy who's been looking for that rub, who's been looking to show that he's a bigger deal. I feel like a guy like Stipe Miocic could use a fight with a guy like Tyson Fury, who's going to talk a lot of mess, who's going to be that foe. He really hasn't had that, and I don't really see one coming down the pipe. Yeah, the Daniel Cormier fight, they could do that again. They could do the trilogy. I'm not super hot on seeing those guys fight again. DC's getting older. We know that it's kind of just one last fight out the door. Doesn't really do one way or another much for his legacy. Okay, he goes out on top. If you're the UFC, do you really want because do you really want DC coming back and beating Stipe? No. Stipe is the guy who has the years behind him. Who has the years of fighting behind him. DC is going to be done one way or the other. So the only other thing that would make sense if you're the UFC to build up Miocic would be a fight with John Jones, and he's able to beat John Jones. The Ngannou fight I still think is going to be a big deal when those guys fight again, but Stipe whooped his ass, man. So if you're both under the ESPN platform, why not do a crossover fight with Tyson Fury and Stipe Miocic? And I'd say the same thing if Masvidal and Canelo were under the same company. They're just not. So I'm being realistic about it. I know that UFC's not going to just let Jorge Masvidal waltz over to DAZN. So until Canelo Alvarez, unless he's able to find a way to get out of his Golden Boy contract, who has this deal with DAZN, until that happens, I just think it's a silly thing to talk about because Masvidal is just not at that level right now from a box office standpoint for them to want to go through those hurdles. But there's not really any hurdles with Stipe versus Tyson Fury. They're both in the same barn. They both fight under the same network. You can definitely make this fight happen.